I'm going to be reading from Genesis chapter 4, verses 1 through 10. And I'm going to be reading from the Amplified if you want to follow along. Now, the man Adam knew his wife, and she conceived and gave birth to Cain. And she said, I have obtained a man, a baby boy, a son, with the help of the Lord. And later she gave birth to his brother Abel. Now Abel kept the flocks of sheep and goats, but Cain cultivated the ground. And in the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground. But Abel brought an offering of the finest, firstborn of his flock, and the fat portions. And the Lord had respect for Abel and for his offering. But for Cain, his offering, he had no respect. So Cain became extremely angry and indignant, and he looked annoyed and hostile. And the Lord said to Cain, why are you so angry? And why do you look annoyed? If you do well, believing me and doing what is acceptable and pleasing to me, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, but ignore my instruction, sin crouches at your door. Its desire is for you to overpower you, but you must master it. Cain talked with Abel, his brother, about what God had said. And when they were alone working in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, where is Abel your brother? And he lied and said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? And the Lord said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's innocent blood is crying out to me from the ground for justice. You can see it.
Good morning, good morning. It is Sunday morning. It is not so beautiful outside, but it certainly is beautiful inside. It's good to see everyone here. A few weeks ago in a Sunday night class, we were discussing the book of Proverbs as it relates to anger. And there was a lot of discussion about anger, and I thought that it might be a good topic for us to talk about here together as we do so often look at things that are in our lives that perhaps we need to pay a little more attention to. Things that maybe entrap us in certain ways and cause us to react in ways that we shouldn't. And anger is certainly one of them. Have you ever noticed that everybody seems to be angry about something? I mean, we look around us and we see, just in our community alone, the difficult things that are going on that make us angry. Trying to get out of the habit at 5 o'clock in the afternoon with all the traffic going back and forth, you know what? That can make you angry. Or the spiraling crime that's taking place not only in our community but in our nation. The political stances that are taken on defunding the police and some of the other things that are being presented out as potential laws can make one angry. The shoplifting has become such a contagious disease in our nation, particularly in our state. It's become a real problem, and that can make us angry as well. So much is going on in our life that this very moment in time in our nation has been called the age of rage, because everybody's angry about something. Of all of the sins that we have in our life, anger may be the most difficult for us to understand, because it is probably the most difficult to try to manage. Many of the sins that we have the Bible is very specific about telling us what to do about them. And that is to get rid of them. The lust and the greed and other things that we face in our lives, the Bible is very clear. Get rid of them. Put them aside. That can't be part of your character. But anger, we can't get rid of anger. What we can hope to do, and what God helps us to do, is to manage it. To manage it. And that in and of itself is not an easy thing to do as well. So I thought this morning we would take a look at what Kevin read, a story about an angry young man, and see if we can look into this story and pull some things out that will probably help us in our struggle to manage our anger. Pride is the first sin that we see in the Bible. And that's, of course, with Adam and Eve and Satan and the forbidden fruit. That's in Genesis chapter 3. But then we get over to Genesis chapter 4, and right away we see another one. We see the sin of anger and how it resolves itself, so to speak, in murder. Beginning in verse 2, again, this is from the NIV. Abel kept flocks and Cain worked the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. And Abel also brought an offering, fat portions for some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he didn't look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. The first thing that we see is our emotions are meant to be expressed. Do you ever think about that? We are an emotional human being. God created us with emotions because our God is a very emotional God. In our anger, unless we do something productive with it, if we try to withhold it, we are going to be walking around like a volcano ready to explode. And if that's going to be the case, it doesn't take much to set that off. We see in Cain's face, it said his face was downcast. We also see, because of the sin in Ephesians chapter 4, beginning in verse 26, in your anger do not sin, do not let the sun go down while you're still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. Well, Paul is acknowledging here very clearly that we're going to feel angry sometimes, and it's what we do with that feeling of anger that's going to cause it to either be sinful or not. Whether we're going to give in to it, or whether we're going to be able to manage it. It's interesting that the first display of sin that we see in the Bible is between family members. Why is it that it's so easy for us to get angry at members of our family or members that we're really close to than others? Well, maybe because we spend a lot of time with them, or maybe because we have an investment in that relationship. Or maybe it's just because we're so confident in that relationship that we don't really think about being hurtful and harmful with things that we say and things that we do. But it does hurt. Family can bring out the best and the worst of us. I have a friend of mine who was a retired canine officer for Santa Maria. And his dog was a black German Shepherd, one of the meanest dogs I've ever seen in my life. Just to look at him was the deterrent. I don't know that you'd ever want this dog to be outside of his car. His name was Sent, S-E-N-T, and he was from Czechoslovakia. And so his commands were in Czechoslovakian, not English, so that they couldn't be copied by a potential criminal. And so he used to come by and visit our house on a Saturday because we were all working in the yard, we were doing things, and he'd pull up in the police car with the canine sticker on it. But he never got out of the car. And so to talk to him, I'd have to go over and he'd roll down the window and we converse. And one time I asked him, why don't you get out of the car? And he said, well, let me show you why. He opened the door and got out. And as soon as he got out of the car, this dog got to attention. And those beady eyes were not looking at him, they were looking at me. And he said to me, don't come over and shake my hand, don't get anywhere close to me. He's looking at every movement that you make. And I said, how can I possibly make a movement? I am frozen in fear. He said, the most dangerous call that we get as a police officer is a domestic disturbance. And you think to yourself, well, what about a bank robbery? Or what about this? Or what about that? And he said, no, it's domestic disturbance because you never know what's going to happen when you open that door. You never know the conflict that's going on inside that house that is causing the phone call to be made to 911. He said the ugliest domestic violence is between husband and wife, between male and female. But he said the deadliest is between brothers. Between brothers. And we see this in Cain and Abel as well. Anger is a natural human emotion, and it's no surprise that it shows up first in family members. The second point I want us to notice is that anger tells us that something is wrong. You ever think about that? When we get angry, it means that there is something wrong somewhere, according to us. We get angry when things don't work the way they're supposed to work. You ever tried fixing a plumbing situation and you're underneath the sink and things aren't working right and you get frustrated and get angry because it's just not working the way that it should? And of course, the hardware store is closed by then and you can't get the parts you need and so on and so forth. But we get angry when we get cut off in traffic or when our kids don't obey us or when we see the news about things that were really upsetting to us. These are all legitimate reasons to be angry because they tell us there is something wrong. There's something wrong. But the problem is this. Sometimes anger springs from our sense of right and wrong. In other words, we're angry about something because it doesn't seem right, but it's because it's not right to us. It's our sense of what's right and wrong. And you know what? Not everyone agrees with us. What I may find wrong, you may say, well, I don't see anything wrong with it, and vice versa. And this is really a good source of human conflict. If you're living in a household where you have different opinions on what's right and wrong, that can lead to a lot of conflict and a lot of anger within the family. In Cain's case, he was angry because his brother's offering was accepted by God and his wasn't. And so he got angry about it. It didn't seem right. It wasn't fair. And so he got angry. Sometimes our sense of right and wrong gets skewed by our own self-centeredness because we're thinking about ourselves. Something bad happens and we want to get it fixed, but it's because we're looking inwardly rather than outwardly and assessing the situation. We're not being honest with ourselves. I'll give you an example. In my Toyota Camry, as in most people's cars, there is a light that comes on when your gas tank gets low. I think it's 1/8 of a tank for the Toyota. I don't remember, something like that. I don't like that light. It bugs me. And the reason it bugs me is it always seems to come on when I don't have time to get gas. You ever notice that? Or it always comes on when I'm on my way over to Santa Maria to see family, and I'm out there in the middle of nowhere, and the light's on, and I'm thinking, what's going to happen? And I'm tense when I'm driving because I'm wondering, am I going to make it to the first gas station? And what if gas is $10 a gallon? Am I going to get it? And on it goes. And so what if I said to you, okay, that light really bugs me, so I'm going to go to Toyota and have them take the light out. Get rid of the light. Did that solve the problem? No. You see, the problem is not the light. The problem is there's not enough gas in the gas tank. So it's the gas tank's problem, right? No. It's my problem. It's my fault because I didn't put enough gas in the car to get to where I wanted to go, so I didn't have to worry about it. That's misdirected anger. And we do that. You have a bad day at work and you go home and kick the dog. That's misdirected anger. You see, we have to take it out on someone or somewhere. Anger is a signal that there's something not right with the world, with the situation, with the relationship. But it could mean that there's something not right with me. It's me. And if we're going to manage our anger, we have to be honest and take a look at it and find out what the source is. And sometimes that source is simply you and me. Whatever it is, it needs to be fixed. But we can't fix it unless we are honest to determine the source of the anger. See, anger is like a warning light on your dashboard. There's a problem. It has to be fixed. But make sure you're fixing it by identifying the proper cause of the problem. Okay. Third thing we learn. Sinful anger is hurtful and misdirected display of passion. Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go out to the field. And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Now, had Abel done anything wrong? No. It wasn't Abel's fault. But you see, Cain was so angry, he had this misdirected display of passion, and he had to take it out on someone, and Abel was there. Abel was the one that was accepted by God, and he wasn't, and so he took it out on him. Did that solve the problem? No. And misdirected anger never solves the problem. It didn't solve the problem then, it made it worse. He became a murderer. It caused grief to Adam and Eve because they lost a son. His brother was now dead. James tells us, my brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Think about this. Anger gives us the illusion of being in control. The illusion of being in control. If I yell out enough, if I speak harshly enough, if I sulk long enough, I'm going to get my way. I'm going to be in control. Anger gives us that illusion. Of course, the irony is, that when we have uncontrolled anger, it has the opposite effect on the situation. We are actually losing control, not gaining control. It's just an illusion. We make things worse instead of better. Sinful anger is hurtful and a misdirected display of passion. Anger becomes sinful when it becomes hurtful. When it becomes hurtful to you, when it becomes hurtful to the person that is receiving your anger, it becomes hurtful to those surrounding the situation that can see anger coming out in that way. There's nothing wrong with a healthy display of anger, but it becomes sinful when it becomes hurtful instead of helpful. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 21, You have heard it said that the people long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you, anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. That's how serious God takes our anger. And he's telling us in this verse, you will become angry, but you've got to be able to manage it. You've got to be able to take care of it. There are many ways to hurt people. You can hurt them physically, emotionally, spiritually. And anger unchecked will quickly move to abuse in the home. Anger unchecked in the home can quickly result in abuse. When we yell, when we throw things, when we threaten, when we punch the wall in an attempt to intimidate or control someone, that's abuse. That's abuse. Even if there isn't any physical violence, that is still abuse. If that's going on in your home, and if that's going on in the home of anyone that you know, it's sin, and it has to stop. Cain was angry with God, but he took it out on Abel. And look at the result. Because your steak is overdone, you yell at the waitress. When you get home after a hard day at work, things that didn't go well at work, you yell at your kids. That's misdirected. That's sinful. Abuse is defined as one person in an intimate relationship trying to dominate or control another. You need to think about that. Anger becomes sinful when it's misdirected. The last thing I want us to think about is anger presents us with an opportunity to do right or wrong. And that's because anger is a signal that something is wrong. Anger is part of that intimate fight or flight instinct that we all have. God said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." You must rule over it. In 1979, a young man named Marcus Brown, age 18, was killed by a drunk driver on a Florida highway. His mother, Becky Brown, channeled her grief and anger into action. And she formed a local coalition of parents who had lost their children to drunk driving. And as this campaign increased and more people became part of her group, this group became known as Mothers Against Drunk Driving, MAD. And if you've had children in school, you know that a good portion of what's being taught at certain particular times of the year is exactly this. They have the police department out. They talk about drunk driving with the MAD stickers and everything else. It has changed and saved thousands upon thousands of lives because she took her anger, she took her grief, and she channeled it in a very positive direction to help other people. And we need to do the same. You see, there's such a thing as righteous anger. It's anger that is managed in the right way. When Jesus arrived at the temple and found the money changers exploiting the poor by charging, and he He threw them out. He was angry and he threw them out. But it was righteous anger because he did what was right with it. You see? Righteous anger does what is right in relationships, in situations. It's allowing our heart and our mind to overcome our anger and direct it in very positive ways. But far too often, it prompts us to do something wrong. So what is the answer? How do we deal with our anger? Righteousness anger is about putting things right and putting relationships right. If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? God tells Cain. Human anger does nothing but bring the righteous life that God desires. But what exactly is righteous anger? Well, it's expressing our anger in righteous ways, in right ways. It's doing right and being right in the sight of God. It's making things right out of a really difficult situation. Well, how do we do that? How do we get it from anger that is out of control in our life to bring it into a righteous anger that God wants? And let me make this suggestion. It starts with prayer. Now, it's not just a prayer where we say, God, help me get over this anger. But it's an angry prayer. Have you ever been angry at God? Has something ever happened in your life that really makes you angry? You just don't understand what's going on? Lord, I am mad now. I'm mad at Mike. Or Mike's mad at me. Or I'm mad at whatever situation. Or God, I'm mad at you. I am angry with you because I don't understand what's going on in my life. See, that's where it starts. Going to God in complete honesty and telling him about your anger, but being specific about it because he wants to help. But he wants to help us by seeing that we understand the source of that anger. What is making us angry in a very honest way. When we look into the Psalms and we read some of the things that David wrote, we see he was angry with God. Where were you when these things were happening to me, God? You've turned your face against me. In Psalms 10, he said, why, O Lord, do you stand far off? Why do you hide from me in times of trouble? David was not happy with the way things were going in his life, and he tells God that. That's part of expressing our anger in righteous ways. And God listens. And God listens. And he listens through our prayers. And he gets us to a better place. So we need to speak it so it's brought to light. We need to understand. We need to talk about our anger. Name what is wrong. There's something wrong. What is it? Find out what it is. And talk to God about it. If it's a relationship problem, talk to the other person about it calmly and in love. But let it out. With the attitude of healing. Then channel it so it accomplishes something useful, something positive, something that's productive. And the third thing is to release it by forgiveness. And that could be the hardest thing that we do with our anger is forgiving other people who have harmed us, who have hurt us, that we're angry with. We need to get over it. That's not an easy thing to do, I know. But it's something we've all faced before. And the only way that we're going to understand the change that it makes in our life when we do release it is by releasing it. And by letting God work through that to give us the peace he wants us to have in every situation. Paul writes, get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as Christ, God, forgave you. The only way we can do that is through prayer. That will take our sinful anger and turn it into righteous anger. And remember this, anger in and of itself is a human emotion created in us by God, and in and of itself is not sin. It's what we do with it. It's how we react to it that causes us to sin. God's righteous anger was on display, punishing sins and forgiving others when he sent his son to the cross. He was angry enough to punish sin by sacrificing Jesus for us. There's a song that we sing. I want to close with this, with these words. "'Twas on that hill so long ago, my Savior suffered grief and pain. The Master died to save my soul, that I the joy of heaven might gain. No one was there to ease his pain when on the cross he cried to God, and there for me he gave his life. For me he shed his precious blood. A precious price his blood was shed. He gave his life to God above, my ransom from the dreadful guilt. At last, the Lord's triumph of love." If God could be angry at our sin in a way that actually accomplished our salvation, then he could most certainly show us the right thing to do with our anger. I think that it would help us all, me included, as we leave this place today and we go on through our week. When you reach that point where you really are angry about something, stop. Think about it. What is it I'm really angry about? What am I going to do with that anger? And it might be that you're at work or you're driving or something. If you have a chance to just write it down and think about it later, you may find out that you don't remember what made you so angry. Because anger can take a molehill and make it into a mountain if we let it. God has given us everything that we need to control that part of our nature. So let's let him show us how to do it. If you're here this morning, we can help you with that. Anything in your life, we want to do that as well. Russell, there he is. He's going to come up and lead us in an invitation song. And if we can help in any way, if you would like prayers of the congregation, not just for anger, but anything that's going on in your life, we know that prayer is the greatest source of strength that we have. And there's nothing more that we can do for each other than remember each other in prayer. And Kevin pointed that out to us this morning. The prayergrams and things that we send out to those who are healing in various ways. So we want to do that. If we can help you in any way this morning, we ask that you come forward as together we stand and sing.